Welcome, everybody, to the CFF List year-to-date leaders review through week 7, along with our predictions for the best and worst performers for the upcoming week 8. I'm your host, Jay Mill. I got my partner, Willie B, as usual. How you doing, Willie?
Doing well.
All right, today, I don't know the number of days. I know other people cite the exact number of days, but it's Tuesday, and it's that Tuesday of the college football season where football games start up, and we will have whatever they say, like 60 to 80 straight days of football, from now until the end of the college and at least the college season, as you'll have college games running from Tuesday through Saturday, and the NFL picking it up on Sundays and Mondays. So always a fun time of year where we just get to go nonstop here. And for that reason, we're trying to get this recorded a little bit early on a Tuesday, but we've got all the data and everything we need to make our predictions and give our analysis of the previous week. We will quickly run through the fact that we didn't have our best performance as far as our predictions go in terms of the scoring system that we have to rank ourselves. You ended up with 1 point, and I ended up with 2 as far as what I'm seeing here on the chart, bringing our season total, J Mill 42, my partner Willie B 34. So we've still got a pretty tight race. Prior to this, as you can see from the chart, we've had much better weeks. At least one of us has had when the other hasn't done so well, the other's had a really big week. Last week we were really happy. We both, were right around the target. We like to minimally reach of 8 points, but we won't dwell on the fact that we didn't score the most points. We mentioned before, it doesn't always mean we've picked horrible picks or made horrible picks, because sometimes you can pick a guy to be the best and he might be the 4th best with a decent amount of points and still not score us anything in our little competition. With that said, Willie, any thoughts on that, or you want to get right into the review of the tight ends here?
Yeah, no, I mean we can get right into it because it's going to lead into kind of what happened anyway.
Right,
So
exactly. And this is a great start to kind of, as you said, Willie, kind of identify what went wrong with some of the scoring. If you're looking at the top 12 tight ends on the list here, we hyped Pittman up, coming back from injury, having 2 great games from Florida State. And then, of course, we make these predictions, a few days before any formal injury reports have to come out. And to our surprise, Pittman was did not play, got the old DNP and got the 0, even though you predicted him to be your best. So that was kind of a cheap way of losing points. You picked a guy, to be your best that didn't even play. So that's really no fault of your own. Now, on the other hand, I picked a guy who ended up with a 0. Would have much rather him been a DNP, did not play. But Brock Rechsteiner just totally disappeared on me and turned out to be the absolute worst pick of the week, with me predicting him to be the best tight end. He got a goose egg. And tell me what you saw in PFF. Like, I had you track to see if he had any snaps. Maybe he got hurt during the game. He didn't show up with any targets, so I thought for sure, well, he just didn't play. But what'd you find out there?
yeah, he had his most snaps of the season with 82. I saw I had it on one of my screens.
Mm-hmm.
He was out there. I mean, he was blocking his tail off.
Yeah.
He just wasn't. I guess it wasn't in the game plan as far as their passing offense for last
Yeah,
week.
I guess that must have been part of the reason that we saw Cam Cook take off for 218 yards. I guess they clearly just shifted the game plan to be almost exclusively run. We know they're run oriented at Jacksonville State, but
Yeah, because
he was just
he
blocking
had
his
40.
butt off of Cam Cook.
Yeah, he had 47 out wide, 21 on the slot, and put his hand in the ground. More so than any other time. He had 14 where he put his hand down, and he only had 7 previously in the previous 5 games. So
Yeah, yeah. And then you absolutely hate when this happens. This is the worst feeling. I picked him to be the best. He ended up as tied for worst with your injured guy, which makes me feel
mhm.
even more horrible. But then the guy I picked to be the worst, Brett Norfleet, he's had a pretty decent season, but disappeared a little bit. I thought, oh, he's not going to do much against Alabama. He ends up having the second best performance against Alabama, with 12.8. So he it looks like he's making himself seen here. He was number 7 going into the week. I guess he's going to move up now, but that's the worst.
So technically, I think I got 2 points here. You may be pencil whipping me. I'm not sure because I'm
No,
looking at
no,
Jolly.
no. That's one. He was the third worst.
Okay.
Third worst.
Okay. So I see what you're doing there. All right.
Yeah, we had a
All right.
tie for the worst with 12, so there is no like 11th place there, or 11th worst finisher.
I got
But
you.
yeah,
Okay.
Jolly was still the third worst. So you got your 1 point from picking Justin Jolie. I always say Jolly, but it's Jolie.
Okay.
NC State only had 2.8 against Notre Dame, which you did accurately predict. So nice job
Yeah.
there, Willie. We'll get our pats on the back out of the way here because that
Yeah.
was your one right there.
It'll be the last one. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty impressive here at the top. Obviously Michael Trigg had a bye. He's been, he's the clear leader right now, just barely ahead of, or not barely, he's a full point ahead of Dorian Thomas. But two of the top three, Dorian Thomas and Terrence Carter, ended up with two of the best performances. Terrence Carter continues to buck the system there at Texas Tech and make them look for the tight end, which we didn't necessarily think would happen, but he's making his presence felt still. And then the unknown from the beginning of the season, Dorian Thomas. We said in week one, after we saw those 16 targets, that was enough to indicate he probably would not be a fluke. He's going to give Trigg a run for his money here for the number one tight end spot pretty soon. He outperformed his season average of 15.3, finishing with 16.1. So you're going to see him get a little bit closer to Trigg this week. So it should be interesting to see, how this week shakes up with the number one and two tight ends going head to head, not head to head, but battling each other for that spot. Any thoughts there or final
No,
thoughts on performances?
I agree there. I agree with you. But I think Carter may come on a little bit too. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Right. Okay. Yeah, Carter, and we'll see. Well, let's go to the real quick. Let's get my notes up here on kind of who fell out. We talked about actually the two guys we mentioned, Pittman and Recksteiner, are no longer in the top 16 thanks to their zeros. And well, actually, Pittman fell off for a different reason. And his zero didn't count against his points per game average because he didn't play. But he's back to now. He has not competed in more than half of his team's games, so he's not going to be on our list moving forward until he gets back to that status. He's falling off because of the injury. Rex Steiner is just falling off because he deserves to after the zero. And then the third worst performer there, Jolie, also didn't maintain enough status here, didn't maintain enough points to stay in the top 12. And then moving into kind of the new top 12 for going into week 8, the new guys that have made their way in, we've got Daquan Wright from Ole Miss, who was just hovering outside number 16, has moved up to number 8. You've got Brahmer, who continues to kind of move in and out of. Actually, no, he was number 12. He just moved up to number 11. It's Bowden Groen from Kansas was the
Right.
second one. He had a huge game. Yeah, he was the top tight end in the country last week with 26.6 points. So that moved him from 25 to 7. He should continue to get targets after the bye. He's got a bye this week, but Hanukkah seems to be injured there, so they're no longer splitting targets at the tight end spot. Groen's getting them all. And then the other guy that made a nice jump, the biggest jump, was Garrett Oakley from Kansas State. He's went from 34 to 12 after putting up 23.1 points. And just looking at something here. Yeah, it looks like we want to change that, Willie. He's got a bye this week. We have him listed to play in Colorado for some reason. He's actually got a bye this week.
Gotcha.
Two of the new guys that have made their way onto the list might end up staying here by default because they've got byes. So glad we caught that before we make our picks. Everybody else is just kind of reshuffled. Not too much movement there. The top three stayed the same. Norfleet moved up from 7 to 4. There's a big tie at the 7th spot. So Mason Minnie holds his ground. Tanner Koziol is right in the same area. We're curious to see if Koziol, takes a rest this week. He's been hurt the last couple of weeks, but still playing. We're kind of hoping, they give him a rest and let him get healthy. He seems to have been injured quite a bit throughout his career, but we'll see what happens there. But Willie, I think you had the low score this week, so that means you go first, right?
Yeah, I guess that's how we're doing things. It's
All right.
yeah, just hoping to do a little bit better this week. Going with that, let's see.
As you're thinking, I'll look. The top 5 tight ends all play teams that are 74th or worse in giving up passing yards, and a couple of those, Mason Minnie and Michael Trigg, are both playing teams ranked 100th or worse in giving up passing yards.
Well, I'll go with my worst first, and I guess I'll say that Dallin Bentley will continue to do a little bit of a slide. He went from 5 last week. Now he's at 10 spot. They have Brigham Young,
Hmm.
who's 17th, and let's see their
Yeah,
pass
and actually, I'm
defense.
looking.
Yep.
I'm
B,
cross-referencing that with Fantrax. They're the best in terms of they've given up the fewest points to tight ends according to Fantrax. So not a bad pick there.
and they've only given up 4 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions, and they give up about 150, about 159.
Yep.
So I'll say Dallin Bentley and that NC State offense may struggle a little bit against BYU.
All right. Well, I've identified the guy I think is going to be the worst, but since you've made that pick, I'll make my prediction for the best here. And I'm not going to reach beyond the top three. These guys all have a excellent shot at doing really well, and I'm talking about Trigg, Dorian Thomas, and Carter. They've all got really good matchups, along with Mason Benny and Norfleet. So I'm gonna stick with our guy Trigg. He's going against the 100th ranked TCU in terms of passing yards. They're also 108th in giving up points to tight ends. He's proven that he's not going to fade in and out anymore as he's done in seasons past. He's going to hold on to his spot at the number one place there. So with that, I have a feeling you'll go with somebody in that top five as well. But who you got for your best guy this week, Willie?
I guess might as well play it safe. Even though I do like what Carter's going to do, I'll probably end up taking him next week when they have Oklahoma State. So we'll go
Mm-hmm.
ahead and go with Dorian Thomas this week against Nevada,
It
who is
holds strong, right?
82nd in the country.
Yeah, I'm looking
Um,
too. He's just a redshirt sophomore. I didn't realize. I think this is the first time I've checked this. He's actually a transfer from Arizona. Did you realize that he's
I
just first year there from
no,
Arizona?
well, yeah, I did know that he switched, but it didn't register as far as
For you?
anything like that since they're not playing Arizona this week. But
Yeah,
yeah, no, he's talented, and like I say, he's just a sophomore. He's going to be around.
yeah. 6 games this year. 3 of them over 16 points. Every game over 7 points. His low is 7. He had another one at 8. You're not even mad if you get 8 in real life out of your tight end these days. But the
No.
fact that he's had 3 over 16, we know what his potential is. So nice move. I'll go against our Kings Classic guy that we've also benched in the Kings Classic this week at tight end for the worst, and that's Koziol. I think we've put him down for 1 week for a reason. We see that he's a little banged up. He's also playing a very tough Arizona pass defense. So you and I are both kind of quietly hoping they just give him a break there, let him get healthy for us for the rest of the season. But Arizona's 10th against the pass. They're 6th on Fantrax's rating as far as giving up points to the tight end. And they've only given up one touchdown on the season in the air. Did you realize that, Willie? So they're number one in the country in terms of giving up touchdowns, passing
Oh
touchdowns.
yeah. I've
Yeah.
been watching them. It's somewhat surprising. It's really surprising
Hmm.
what they're doing there on defense. The 9 interceptions. I mean, that's what's striking to me also.
Yeah, pretty amazing
So
secondary is what it looks like. So,
right.
a couple guys we I think Mason Minnie's a good play against North Carolina too. They're 108th against the pass, so wouldn't be afraid to play him. And it's my other choice for worst would have been Stowers. He's going against a pretty tough LSU defense.
Hmm.
Daquan Wright should probably hold his own and get his usual 10 or 11 points there against Georgia. I wouldn't be afraid to play him against Georgia, but I just don't think he's going to have a better week than these guys that are already at the top. So then we've got 3 guys on bye. All right, that'll finish the tight ends. Let's move into the performance from last week's running backs. I'm looking here at the top 16 going into week 6 and our predictions for week 7. We stuck with something we've done here at running back a couple times. We picked the number 1 and 2 guys to kind of maintain that status and finish with the best with Jonah Coleman and Henry. They both had bad games for them, okay games if you played them in real life. Coleman had 13, Henry had 12. You could certainly have done better. So they didn't get us any points here. But the guys that were the standouts were Cam Cook, who we talked about. Clearly, they didn't throw the ball and definitely didn't throw the tight end. We know that, but they didn't need to. Cam Cook had his 200-yard game, finished with 37.3 points. Second best was
Antoine.
right underneath him, Antoine Raymond, who I think I had mentioned last week. People shouldn't be afraid to play him against Washington. Rutgers ended up losing, but we called that out as a situation where Raymond's going to get his carries no matter what. He didn't really even split any time with C.J. Campbell. That's kind of out the window. He's kind of really taken over that Monangai role as the volume pig at Rutgers, so you could probably safely play him every week from this point on. He finished second best. And then the third best game was Jeremiah Love, who just continues to, showcase his skills there at Notre Dame with 20.6 points. I will point out, though, the third best running back on the list only had 20. That's a good game if you're playing a running back and he gets you 20. But you probably do expect a little more, if you're looking at, the third best performance from a group of top 16 running backs, in
I
all
think
of
we need to,
CFF.
yeah, I think we need to switch. Yeah, you need to switch that. That should be Emmett Johnson.
Oh, you're right. Yeah,
Yeah.
an error. So yeah, Jeremiah Love actually got fourth. Emmett Johnson beat him by a point. Didn't affect either one of us. That actually just makes me look worse because Emmett Johnson was my pick to do the worst against what I thought was a pretty tough Maryland defense. So Willie's changing that on the spot. And again, I get stuck picking a guy to be the worst who ends up being the third best. But again, I think the fact that your third and fourth best running back had 21 and 20 from the top 16 indicates we had a pretty down week overall, I think, for the running backs. Wouldn't you
Hmm.
say? I don't see,
No,
outside of
yeah,
those top two, there's nothing that anybody did that's too impressive. A lot of performances where, again, you're satisfied, you're okay with, Kawan Lacey getting you 18, Wayne Knight getting you 18, Trianum getting 18. But I guess to put it in perspective, Chip Trianum got 18.5, and it wasn't enough to keep him on the list because, he was averaging 21, and that lowered his average enough to bump him from the list. A lot of mediocre games here from the top running backs. The worst of which were Ahmad Hardy, surprisingly, had 7.4 against Alabama. He'd been the workhorse there, got shut down. Caleb Hawkins from North Texas, I saw him with a fumble, just didn't have it like he had these past couple weeks as we all got excited about him. Then Justice Haynes, who we said, we weren't going to go against ever after he made us look bad last week, finishes with 9.1. This would have been the week to go against him. And we didn't do that. So, but again, across the board, just, pretty mediocre performance. That ends up resulting in three of these guys getting bumped, including, I guess, actually the three guys that were at the bottom. Adam Randall, he was 14th. He had only 12.5. I mentioned Trianum had a pretty good week with 18.5, but not good enough to stay on the top 16. And then Turbo Richard had 15.1. And again, that's where I would point out that Turbo Richard was your pick for the worst. 15, was almost enough to get you some points there, Willie. But so I think you didn't quite steer people wrong with Richard, being a prediction for worst because he certainly was in the bottom half here with 15, but just not bad enough to get you any points. So bad
right,
enough to
right.
fall out of the top 16. And see how that shakes things up. Any thoughts on those guys, though?
No, like you said, it's just a down week for backs. I mean, when you don't reach your averages, and that's from top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
it's just going to be one of those weeks that it will happen, and especially when you talk about a guy like Caleb Hawkins, young kid, you can't expect him to be on his A game every week. So,
Yeah,
and
keep
that's
an
why
eye.
he
They
he
still
tumbles down to 16.
right. And they're working. They seem to be working McGill into the rotation there too. So it's not a situation in North Texas where he's like a clear stud running back one. He's still going to be splitting some carries. So be cautious there with him a little bit. If you've got other options, definitely consider them because the announcers are actually giving McGill more hype than they were Hawkins.
Yeah,
As
but
though
the
he
thing
was still like
the thing is
the
about
guy.
that though. I mean, he still had 15. I mean, the most carries
Yeah.
he's had is 16. So I mean, he's still getting his
Yep.
work.
Yep.
They just fell. They basically what happens. They fell too far behind.
Right. Right. And
When you
started
lose
playing from
63 to
behind him.
36, I mean, that's
Right. That's a good point. That is a really good point. They started off, I think, with a 14-0 lead. South Florida just put it on them, and they had no choice but to just throw the ball almost every single play, at a certain point. So that is a
right.
good
I mean,
point.
it's 21 all at halftime, and they just didn't come out of the half ready to play because South Florida put 28 on them in the third quarter, and that was it.
Right. Right. Good point. Good point. Trying to see. This is one other change here. Can you change Cameron Cook to playing Delaware? I don't know why I have Maryland. It must have been late night or something. I was going too quick. That didn't
Wow.
seem right because I know everybody's in conference play. And Delaware's 80th on Fantrax, but I know we're going to use rushing yards. So I'll go through kind of the shakeup here while you get that fixed. I'm glad I caught that one also before we move on. The shakeup among running backs, I mentioned the bottom three are all out at running back. That makes room for Cameron Dickey, who's been a nice grab ever since the other starter went out with an injury there. Claiborne, who's kind of bounced in and out of the top 16. He was only at 18, so he didn't have to move far to get into that number 14 spot. The one that surprised me because he had really been off my radar was Lincoln Parr from Texas State. I didn't realize he'd been having such a good season. It caught my attention because when he ended up at the number 11 spot here, and I was updating where he was last week, I saw he only moved from number 19 to number 11. So again, because he hadn't been in the top 16, I had kind of been ignoring what he had done. But he's had 3 games over 25 points, and the ones in between haven't been horrible. His low is 13-7. Texas State is, as you'll see starting here, they've got a guy in the top 16 running backs, a receiver in the top 16, and a quarterback in the top 16. Now that Brad Jackson's made his way into that list, as you'll see later. So pretty good offense that's rolling there at Texas State. But Parre was the big surprise for me. Did you realize he was doing as good as he was, Willie?
No.
So there you go. We've got some interesting new guys, and you had the first pick as far as making the picks with the tight end. So it'll be up to me to get us started here with the best or worst pick for running backs. I think I'm going to take the easy way out here. I'm going to look for the bounce back with Robert Henry. I've gone with him a few times. He's rarely let me down. I'm going to give him another shot here against a really bad North Texas running defense, a rush defense, 128th, and let's see, giving up 12 touchdowns. Not giving up so many touchdowns, but giving up over 200 yards. So looking for Henry to have the bounce back game there.
Yeah, I was hoping that he would sneak by and be available, but to no avail.
Yeah, but this is interesting. I'm looking at the top 10. If you take out Heidenreich, who's got a bye, you've only got Henry and Cook in the top 10 facing teams, rushing defenses that are worse than 35th, which is pretty amazing. 2 guys in the top 10 with seemingly good matchups. Everybody else in the top 10 has got a really tough matchup facing teams 35th or better in terms of yards allowed on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to go with the guy that I've seen with the hot hand, and I think unfortunately I'm going to be up against him in a few matchups this week, so might as well get something out of it in case I do get my tail whipped. We're going to go with Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. They have Minnesota. He's averaging 25 points a game. Just kind of, I mean, his worst game was against Michigan 3 weeks ago with 14.7. Since then,
Mm-hmm.
he's had 36 and then 21.6 last week against Maryland, coming off of 100 and his best game of the season, 76 yards on the ground. He didn't get in the end zone, but he's just consistent, and so
Yeah, makes sense.
you can find a whole lot worse on this list for this week. So feel a little bit more comfortable with him.
Right. All right, look, interesting. We're going against what is perceived to be a pretty tough D, but you're saying it's not going to matter. Kind of like my philosophy with Raymond. He's going to get his carries and still get his yards and
Right.
make use of it. So, all right. Like I said, a lot of tough matchups here, so I've got to pick my worst from among a big group of backs that are playing tough teams. Yeah, I'm not going to go against Coleman. He's looked too good. Cook's the other guy up at the top that I would have picked to have the best week. They're playing Wednesday, but I've made my best choice, so I can't go with him. I'm not going to doubt Jeremiah Love going against USC or Raymond, even though he's going against Oregon. That leaves me with Hardy going against Auburn. I like Dickey no matter what against Arizona State. Haynes, if Raymond can do pretty good against Washington, I think Haynes can also. So I've named almost everybody here, but with that, let me skip down to the very last guy, number 16, Caleb Hawkins. He's playing UTSA. I think they get stuck in a similar situation that you pointed out. They get behind. They probably have to abandon the run and lean more on the pass. So nothing against Hawkins. But the fact that UTSA has also only given up 8 defensive or rushing touchdowns. They've only given up 8 rushing touchdowns on the season, which is pretty good. I'll say Caleb Hawkins is going to have another tough week.
All right. I'm gonna go Justice Haynes against
Okay.
Washington. He may not be fully healthy. I think maybe that's probably what happened a little bit last
Mm-hmm.
week. But Washington, their top 10 defense, only giving up 5 scores, giving up about 82 a game. So we'll go Justice Haynes as my worst.
Yeah, I'm reading the coach's quote. Go
I was
ahead.
kind of thinking, I was kind of like you were saying, that Cook matchup looks a little bit too good, but I'll go ahead and stick with them at Johnson. But I did like that Cook, him having a
Against
decent
Delaware.
week against Delaware. Yeah, yeah. Now, what were you saying about the coach?
Yeah, yeah. Now, on Justice Haynes, yeah, I didn't realize he got banged up in the last game, and not too encouraging. There was a quote from the coach that Fantrax has cited here. I think there's a chance he could play.
Wow.
That doesn't just ring. That doesn't ring with confidence. I think there's a chance. I think one thing, and then a chance. So both of
Yeah,
those
that's
are
yeah,
seemingly doubtful words if you kind of break down, the actual sentence itself. I think there's a chance he could play.
yeah.
Well,
Wow.
there's always a chance a kid could play, really, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly.
I think that's his way of saying he's not going to play. But we'll
Right.
see. You might have made a good sneaky pick.
I think you might want to prep and just in case he plays, but yeah, he's not playing. I don't think so.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So there you go. Let's move on to the quarterbacks. Looking at how the guys from the week 6 leaders list looked with our week 7 predictions. And another example, like you picked Colton Joseph to be the best. Not a horrible pick. You didn't get any points, but he still had 25.6 against Marshall. And I would say from watching that game, he was contained as much as any team could contain a quarterback and still manage 25 points. So I think that in itself is saying a lot. I mean, they restricted him about as much as he could possibly have been restricted, and he still managed to squeak out 25.6. So he proved even in a loss why he's the number one fantasy quarterback because he got 25 points in a bad game. And that was his
Hmm.
worst game of the season. He hadn't had a game under 30 all year. When your worst game going into week 7 is almost 26 points, that's the quarterback you want on your roster.
Right. I agree with that. Your guy, well, let's go to the second guy first. Blake Horvath. He just continues to
Yeah,
be on a tear
yeah.
while he's
From last
what
season on.
yes, exactly. And then for him to come up from 27 the previous week, and we'll see where he ends up. He is ascending toward the top of this list.
Yeah, and the fun conversation we had last week was about these two service academy quarterbacks that are sitting right next to one another at 7th and 8th going into week 6 or through week 6. And what's interesting, I'm about to pull up a little stat, from last week. Well, one, I correctly predicted Sarka to have a pretty good week, and he didn't disappoint with 36.6, only finishing behind Horvath at 37.1, and Byron Brown, who is back to his 2023 form, it seems, who had 42 points. But the interesting thing I thought of was not only did Sarka have a big week for Air Force and Horvath for the Navy, the Army quarterback, I'm trying to see where he finished. Cale Helms finished with 27.7 to make some noise on his end. Now, granted, the Army situation has been frustrating because they've had Coleman in and then they've had Helms come in. What's crazy though, they've both had really, if you could looked at their individual stats week to week, whoever has played the most for Army has been over 25 points in most weeks. So we were shocked last week that you still had two Service Academy quarterbacks in the top 16 when really the Army quarterback's making enough noise that I wouldn't be surprised if Helms starts to make his way closer to this list as the season progresses because he's coming off of back-to-back weeks of 27.7 and 28.3 following, a week 2 30 game performance. The only games he hasn't performed like that is when they've decided to throw Coleman back into the mix. But it looks like Helms might have kind of taken over as the legitimate number one quarterback there in the Army backfield. But it's just crazy to me that you got 3 Service Academy quarterbacks here that we can talk about that are performing at a high level in college fantasy football. It just still really shocks me
Yeah,
for whatever reason.
it's funny that we're touring with the term quarterback. with him, but based off of his
Oh yeah,
attempts is what I mean. But
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. He's
he is
all
still
rushing.
getting it
Yeah,
done.
all rushing. Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And in the difference in him and the other two that are on the list is like, yeah, they're not throwing much, but they are making the most of those, 6 to 8 or 9 attempts that they get every game. Very efficient with those. The bad performances here was our guy from Oklahoma, John Mateer, coming back with the injured thumb. Didn't seem to be quite back to normal, back to 100%. Had a pretty horrible game at 8.6. Most people probably didn't play him if they had him. I know we didn't. And then his counterpart in that game, Arch Manning, even though they won, he wasn't too impressive from a fantasy perspective. Only had 14 points himself. And then the third worst was the guy that I picked. So I got points all around here at quarterback. I thought Mendoza would struggle against Oregon, and he did, finishing with only 15.7. This is where I got actually my 2 points. So this is where I get my pat on the back for the week, is having an accurate idea of kind of how the quarterback would fare. Otherwise, you got Taylor Green, who uh, had 30. And the quarterbacks were the opposite of the running backs. You've got a guy like Taylor Green who got 30.5, and Haynes King who had 30.5 and didn't even make the top three. So you had a really strong performance here from quite a few quarterbacks. 6 of them had over 25 points, including Joseph there. And then three guys had a bye. Your guy that you predicted to be the worst, again, you almost got it. Mayava from USC was 17.9, was certainly close to finishing there to where Mendoza did at 15.7. So you didn't mislead anybody there, Willie. You just didn't get points.
No, I mean if you exclude these two former Heisman hopefuls from the Red River game, kind of throwing a monkey wrench into the standings here. Um, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
the Mavia would have probably been, around the 14th, worst. So it is what it is.
Yeah,
Hopefully, hope,
and proof of that is, you know, the three worst are no longer in the top 16. Mayava is the other one that didn't make it in the top 16. You had 4 shuffle their way out. Um, including the guy you picked to be worse. So I think that's saying something in itself, that he's one of the 4 that did not make it into this week's top 16, as 4 new guys appear, including a guy you have in the home league, Demond Williams, jumped from 36 to 11 after a 50-point performance against Rutgers, running wild all over the place. His speed was amazing watching him. Then you have Pavia work his way back in. Actually, the 3 guys in 14th, 15th, and 16th spot here. Pavia went from 18 to 14. Levitt went from 19 to 15. Brad Jackson, as I mentioned earlier, from Texas State, makes an appearance from the 17th spot. I'm just looking at something really quick. Wouldn't show me here. Never mind. I can't remember if
would
Pavia had a bye. I think and Levitt was hurt, so Levitt kind of makes his way in by default. That's what I was thinking of. Levitt sat out with an injury, but because the quarterbacks at the bottom of the list did so poorly, he kind of works his way back. He backs his way into the top 16 again since he didn't play. His average of 26.3 stayed right where it was. So we'll be keeping an eye on him. You got any notes there on Levitt this week for the injury, Willie? Because I'm making my way to go try to find that and see kind of what it's saying he should be doing this week.
saying he was a full participant. Yeah, guess this is from today. Yeah, said he was a full
Might have
participant
been
in the practice,
okay. All right, so
but it
that's
still,
always a good sign.
still
Looking like
remains in question. How you play that little game. Hopefully, the Big 12 will let you know
yep, yep,
as soon as possible. If not, it's going to be the Jeff Sims show. Might heed that if you have better
yeah,
options. That's for sure.
yep. So again, those 3 at the bottom are new. Demond Williams, the way he played, we always talk about who might be leaving this week and who might be here to stay. That's new to the list, and it's hard to see Demond Williams uh, really moving out of the top 16 the way he looked. But we'll see. He's got a tough game against Michigan this week. We'll see if he can use his feet and get those rushing yards that he used last week to have another big game.
Gotcha.
But I went first with the didn't I? I went first. So you're first here with the quarterbacks, Willie.
Yeah. Like I say, we get these cheap ones out of the way. I mean, with Levitt being dinged up, we'll like I said, I would steer clear if you have better options. I mean, he's 15th on the list, so there's other options here
Mm-hmm.
that should be more forthcoming than what a dinged up Sam Levitt can provide against Texas Tech defense.
Right. Okay. So that gives me a minute. I can pick my best here. And he's a guy that I haven't picked all year. I've been a big fan the last couple of years. We've always had him really high in our rankings in terms of kind of the preseason accolades and everything. I'm going to go with good old Haynes King there to stay consistent. He hasn't had a game under 21 points or really close to 22, 21.9 all season. He's got back-to-back, 30 plus point games against ACC opponents. He's got Duke, who's 119th against the pass. We know he can also run, but he's going to get his passing yards this week as well. So, give me the consistent Haynes King, who, when he's not hurt, is one of the best CFF quarterbacks you could ask for.
Okay. Well, I'm going to go with one of my quarterbacks in our home league. You've already talked about
Mm-hmm.
Demond, but not him. We're going to go Brendan Sorsby. They get Oklahoma State this week. Oklahoma State is 133rd in the country. They've given up
Yeah.
16 passing touchdowns. They give up almost 300 passing yards a game. I know they're playing a little
Mm-hmm.
bit better, these past couple of weeks, but that defense is not playing any better. So
Right.
Brendan Sorsby's
Yeah. Pretty
averaging
horrible.
29.4. His he's coming off actually his worst game of 19.2. So say
Mm-hmm.
he's still going to have a bounce back game, and I believe that was really probably his rushing. No, he had two fumbles. That was the problem because
Right.
he's still tossing his two touchdowns a game that he normally does. So figure he'll have a bounce back game and get back up over 200 passing yards, which he did not do against UCF. He shouldn't have that problem against Oklahoma State.
Yep. All right. Yeah, great choice. And again, for ththose that can't keep count, I mentioned it in the waiver draft. That Oklahoma State ranking is 133rd out of 136 teams. 100, so, fourth worst in the country in yards allowed. That's horrible. It's crazy also that we're up to 136 teams and that they're
Right.
picking players from here. Pretty amazing. But a lot of the matchups here, are pretty solid, especially for these guys at the bottom of the list. Brandon Lewis going against UAB, Hoover is going against Baylor, Sawyer Robinson against TCU. So you got a lot of nice matchups. Even Bryson Barnes going against San Jose State. And man, Byron Brown, like I said, he is back to form there at USF. So really good. Should be another big week for the top quarterbacks. Interesting to see what Colton Joseph can do against JMU. I think no matter what, you play him. He's earned that number one spot, like I said, with a low of 25. I don't think he'll have the best game out of the group on this list, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's still in the mid 20s, even against a tough JMU defense. So that leaves me with my worst pick going to Pavia from LSU. LSU is 42nd and giving up passing yards. We know that he can also run the ball, but he's definitely not going to put up the points in the air. LSU's only given up 4 touchdowns to go along with the 194 that they give up in the air. That's going to stifle him enough to have him near the bottom of this group as a top 16 quarterbacks this week.
Yeah, I
So,
like that. I like that pick. Like you said, there's going to be some pretty stout numbers. At least there should be some pretty stout numbers out of this group. I'm predicting a lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
30s.
yeah. I would agree with you. So let's with that move on to the final position group, which is our wide receivers. Here we go. Here's our look at the last week's year-to-date leaders for the receivers. That going into week 7, what we see here was Willie. Willie did the move that we hate. He had Chris Brazzell predicted to be the best from Tennessee, going against Arkansas, who on paper made sense. They're 115th against the pass, but ended up with just 1.5 points.
Okay, well, I have a
My
question
pick for
here.
the best was Jeff.
I have a
Yep,
question.
go ahead.
Sorry. You're in a shootout, correct? Why does he only get 4 targets?
Yep.
It
Yeah, I
makes
don't know.
no sense to
I've got
me.
to look at the box score.
I mean,
Yeah,
it makes
that's the
no
problem with
sense.
Tennessee guys is we've seen them, moving from kind of one guy to another, kind of doing the Lincoln Riley move there, kind of not allowing you to necessarily be able to figure out who the top dog's going to be at Tennessee. This is kind of the second year, maybe third year in a row we've seen that happen. Makes it tough if you're relying on the Tennessee receiver because they tend to mix it up. So I don't know. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, see, I mean, 64
Don't
snaps,
know.
he gets 4 targets. That's absurd.
Right.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt you there. That's just very frustrating.
No, good. No, good point. Good point. It allowed us to get that information out there about Tennessee in general. Just kind of having a different guy that they key on as far as the targets almost every single week it seems like. So, but yeah, my pick for best didn't quite pan out. Jeremiah Smith had a good game at 15.5, but not good enough to be at the top. And then my worst, Omar Cooper, I accurately predicted would finish second to his teammate, Elijah Surratt, but I also predicted him to be the worst on this list, and um, he outperformed that. He ended up with 12.4. So I can say I did expect him to continue to slide, and 12.4 is definitely not something you want to see from a top 16 guy. And meanwhile, his counterpart there, Surratt, it doesn't seem to matter now who he's playing against. He's going to put up points. He's proven that now against Oregon and another team earlier in the season that we kind of questioned what he would do against. So his 26.1 was enough to finish second best against Oregon. And then the top guy was Danny Scudero, who is just, the stock has been going up every single week at a very high rate, 52 points. And you got that open. Let's dig into Scudero a little bit. 24 targets. We talked about how he could be the replacement for Nash in terms of the crazy targets they were dishing out last week. He's now had 4 of his 6 games with over 15 targets. He's not the guy we think will be Nash's replacement in targets in that offense. He is the 1-to-1 equivalent of what Nash was getting in terms of targets last year at this point. Right. He's got, 5 of his 6 games have been over 130 yards. 4 of those, as we said, have been over 15 targets. This guy's doing it all. Touchdowns, yards, receptions. It doesn't matter what kind of league you're in. You're getting points if you got this guy, and we're smart enough to pick up the FCS transfer at San Jose State.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Crazy. Yeah, amazing what he's doing.
Yep. And, the worst guys, 2 of the guys here at the bottom, Concepcion was third worst, only had 9.5. Jeremy Bernard only had 5 points as second worst. And then we talked about Brazel there for Tennessee being the worst. So
1.5.
In terms of how that shook up, 1.5 points, yeah. In terms of how that shook up the list, the only Brazel, amazingly, even with 1.5, managed to stay in the top 16. He's still at 21.3 for the season, so he moved down to number 11. Still pretty amazing. You only had 2 receivers get bumped off, and those were the other 2 worst finishers with Bernard and Concepcion. The guys replacing them were Bryant Westco, who, again, didn't have to make a big jump. He was sitting at 20. He jumps into 15. And then Camden Brown, who I think quite a few people have seen coming from Georgia Southern, jumps from 31 to 12. But again, that seems like a big jump, and it is. But it's not a surprise necessarily because, the momentum's been moving in his favor in terms of, what he's been doing there at Georgia Southern. He had 33.8, which is what kind of launched him here into the top 16. But he's had 2 games over 22. His worst is 11. Every other game is over 15.5. By no means is this a fluke entry into the top 16. He was picked up in a lot of leagues over the last 2 weeks, deservedly so. So I think he's a guy in that Georgia Southern offense where we've seen
that's
a lot of big
another
performers the last couple of
years. Another guy who is seeing that target increase. He had 17 targets, so 12 for 158. Exactly. So very nice game.
There were a few guys. Yep. And I'm trying to now see kind of where Wesco, the sophomore, is. Again, didn't have to come from too far out, but 21.6 point game is what put him here. His low was the week before at 6.2, so a little more inconsistent. Prior to that, he had 3 games over 25, so he's really only had 2 bad games. One to start the season, and then 6.2 against North Carolina, who they blew out. So that could have affected that. So it looks like Wesco's turned into the number 1 guy there at Clemson after the injury to the previous number 1, Williams, I think. I don't know that he'll maintain top 16 status. But, the spot he came from, which was 20, is definitely within range there for him.
No, you would think that he should,
by those guys.
Just based on, like I said, that NC game, it could have just been the blowout, but I mean, he's outside of that game. This last game with the 21.6, that's been his lowest, other than that UNC game. So he should stay here. He scored in every game other than that one. So this is one that might
in the 20s,
stick around.
I see what you're saying. Yeah,
it's one that might stick around.
Right. Okay, and I guess it'll kind kind of go along with however Clemson decides they want to play in general, right?
Exactly.
Or even if they're playing from behind, it might even work to his benefit. So,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, am I kicking us off here on these picks though? Yeah, I think so, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
You went first, I went first, you went first. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, he's actually intriguing as picking for the best here. He's going against SMU, who's 135th in giving up
Oof.
passing yards. So let's see how many touchdowns have come of that. Only 12 touchdowns and somehow 10 interceptions. So they've kind of offset the yards a little bit by not giving up as many touchdowns as you'd expect. It's still near the bottom. So shockingly, 10 interceptions. Though I don't know how they're giving up that many. Maybe that's part of the problem. Their DBs are just taking too many chances and going for those INTs when they should be, going for the tight coverage.
Right, because they're still
But
giving up
yeah, I don't
315.
know what's that.
They're still giving up 315 through the air. Yeah, that's yeah, feast or famine, I guess.
Yeah, it sounds like it. But yeah, several guys here at the bottom playing teams really bad. Hey, look, let's get the worst out of the way. Let's go with your guy, Chris Braswell, to continue to slide. He's going against a really tough Alabama defense, who's on the opposite end of SMU. They're third in the country in giving up yards, with 137 yards given up a game only, and only 5 touchdowns. So again, let's take what seems to be the easy pick here for the worst, by far the toughest matchup, and a guy who's we don't have a lot of confidence in after last week.
Well, I thought the easy slam dunk is going to be, and I'll take my best, and that's going to be Danny Scudero. Yeah, like I say, he's on a tear. He gets Utah State. They've given up 14 passing touchdowns. They give up 256 through the air. Danny Scudero, just go ahead and just do your thing. He's at least going to give you what,
Yeah,
25?
crowding. Yeah, because
Yeah,
this is the point in the season where everybody started to wonder if Nash could hold on to that number 1 or 2 spot. And you had some doubters, but he maintained it all season long, finished number 1. So interesting to see if we can get a San Jose State wide receiver finishing in the number 1 spot for the second year in a row, right?
right. I mean, so like I said, I mean, the his two worst games as far as targets has been 10. I mean, that's kind of crazy to me. That's the least amount of targets he's going to get is 10, which that's what you want as far as a
Yep,
fantasy wide receiver.
exactly. All right. So now I've got to make my pick for best. Got a real good option there at the number 2 receiver with Lemon going against Notre Dame. Jordan Tyson's at number 3 with a tougher matchup against Tech. Texas Tech defense looks really good. I'm not going to touch that one, especially with his quarterbacks, his number QB1 status in question. I think Jeremiah Smith is going to kind of just be a victim of too many options in that Ohio State offense. So I don't think he'll be the best or the worst. He'll just put up 18 to 20, 18 to 22. So let's look at got our guy Bo Sparks against a shaky Marshall Passy. Could be a nice shootout there, Marshall versus Texas State. And then you've got Craver against Arkansas. Let's go Camden Brown, the guy we hyped up, or I just hyped up from Georgia Southern. He's the new guy that came from the furthest out into the top 16. Love the matchup there against Georgia State. So I'll stick with Brown to remain consistent and get his targets against Georgia State, who's 110th against the pass and has given up 10 TDs. Expect him to add to that and get at least one this week also. Is my best. Camden Brown. Yeah, I wasn't saying anything because I knew it was still going to be recording you fine. You were real choppy on like maybe the 3 previous guys you had talked about.
Okay.
So we're just going to, assuming that your recording's still going to be fine. We're so far into it. Even if I had to end it, I would have, you could have made your pick and we would have,
Okay.
we're far enough
Gotcha.
into it when that happened. I don't care, but go ahead. I just made my pick of Camden Brown. I said all I needed to say, so you can just kind of go into it with, all right, you say kind of however you would say it when I make a pick and then make your own.
All right. All right. So Camden Brown, I like that pick. We talked about him a little bit and all the targets that he was getting. So really love that. I'll go with my worst, and that's going to be Ian Strong from Rutgers.
Okay.
They get a stout Oregon team and especially defense. They've given up 3 passing touchdowns. They have 6 interceptions. They only give up 139 through the air. So it might be a little rough for the Knights.
Yeah, and I would say on that, Surratt proved you can have a receiver have a good game against Oregon. I think the difference here kind of goes down to what we've talked about with Rutgers all season, and that's that they've got a group of receivers that are all having a good season. So when going against an Oregon team that's as good as they are, and the way Rutgers spreads the ball around, I agree that Strong probably won't have his best game and does have the potential to potentially be one of the worst here out of this top 16 because if he's covered, they're not going to try to force it to him like Indiana might have, kind of forced it to Surratt a few times. They're going to kind of openly spread it around and maybe even focus more on the run with Raymond doing as good as he's doing. So nice job there. And with that, we're kind of reached the limit we'd like to be at with an hour. Willie, good luck this week. It's kind of the pivotal time in a lot of these leagues. Hopefully, what we've offered up can help people in some of their decisions. And I'll let you take us on out of here.
Yeah, hopefully you guys could hear me. We know we didn't have the best audio this week, but yes, it's getting to that time where you get a little bit nervous and you need these wins. So thank you guys for watching and listening, and good luck this week.